I'm Nevine Mahmoud. We're at N+B Gallery at my solo show, Foreplay. I try to pick titles that sit amongst the work rather than define them. So Foreplay felt right in that it's a sort of nod to play and the toy-like aspects of the sculptures, and somewhat provocative as well. I grew up in London and did my undergrad there and wanted to move to California and came here to do my master's at USC, but also felt like I really wanted to think about sculpture in this environment. Stone, for instance, was something I was only really able to work with once I moved here. I think I've always enjoyed, especially the scale of which I've worked for a couple of years, enjoyed working outside. With stone, it was quite a specific material situation that led me to sort of work in this studio that's a totally outdoor studio, and felt so much better for me personally to work in that way. So once I started working in Ventura, I have a studio up there amongst a community of stone carvers. That just became almost like a very pleasurable experience to work in that way. So I think that's how the investment in this material also progressed. This show is definitely that particular body of work exploring stone and sort of me trying to push its limits and incorporate it into my own vocabulary. I think now that I've had enough time with it, I think there's something about the labor involved and the resistance the material gives you, matched with the seduction and allure and sort of mystery of it. It was something really interesting that it's gonna do what you want it to do once you learn how to treat it in a certain way, but then it's always surprising you with things you uncover, and that became really fascinating to me. The installation is laid out this way because the whole show sort of was born of this one idea, which is in the front room, these two pieces that are a pair that fit together and talk about, in a very simple way, positive and negative, male, female, and that was the genesis of sort of the rest of the objects. And then this room was far more intuitive. These were sort of like the babies of those two. That room was very planned, and this was very like one thing at a time, response to one another to sort of get the right circuit going for the viewer. The way that they exist in the room and amongst each other is definitely, there's sort of like a stage here, and it's trying to lead you through this somewhat obscure narrative of objects. I enjoy this sense of things being in components rather than a whole, so you're sort of in touch with the room as much as you're in touch with one thing in front of you. These objects are really dense and heavy, but the way that they're presented is sort of like trying to occupy the space up and around. So a sense of lightness, I think, was something I was thinking about a lot with these. And in the other room, more tension. A pleasurable kind of tension, but a sexual tension or physical tension nonetheless. Formally, I've thought a lot about positive and negative space and how those two are equal, or I want them to be equal in a room where you experience sculpture. So the space around something can be as charged and important as the thing itself. Before a lot of the figurative, erotic aspects started appearing in my work, I was very focused on later minimalist-minded artists. And now this is sort of later down the line when I'm attempting to insert more personal, subjective aspects of myself in the sculpture. Those creases and the crevices that are bodily or almost like an inflated toy are my personal way of sort of combining different ideas or things that you might recognize as form and sort of smushing them all together. The erotic aspect of this work is a kind of exposing of something that looks familiar maybe, but then it's set up in a way that's a bit weird. I don't really know what's going on until you look a little closer. Fluidity is important to me, I think, as a reoccurring motif or a theme, let's say. I mean, it's quite broad, but it is a feeling I get from objects that I'm attracted to. Stone, again, was something that is inherently non-fluid, so rendering these forms that way was the ultimate challenge, to sort of combine this sensual, ideal object with this material that is so dense and so hard. Fluidity for me is also like a feminine affect, and I think as a sculptor, very aware of being a woman and a young female artist. That's where I'm like constantly propelled to make these forms. The concentration is in these sort of sensual, fluid, soft shapes. For me, with any sculptural practice, there's so many materials and people involved, whether they're not authoring the work, but there's so many craftsmen, technicians, fabricators that I work with here in LA that has brought me so much pleasure to make the work that I don't think it would exist without them. It's definitely me being the filter for it, but again, it's so many different communities and people and processes going on that make it sort of happen. That's what I see also when I look at the work.